My name is Vanessa Cole. I'm 34 years old and I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I want to tell you about the phone call I got on a Tuesday morning in October when I was sitting on my couch in my apartment on Selwyn Avenue with a heating pad across my lap and a cup of peppermint tea going cold on the coffee table. 19 days had passed since my surgery. 19 days since I'd woken up in a recovery room at Atrium Health Carolina's medical center with a thin cotton blanket and an IV in my left arm and a nurse named Deb holding my hand. Because there was no one else there to hold it. The first thing I said when the anesthesia fog lifted wasn't, "Where am I?" or "How did it go?" The first thing I said was, "Did anyone call my parents?" Deb had looked at me with a very particular kind of careful. "Your friend Maya is in the waiting room," she said. "Not my parents, my friend." So when my mother's name lit up my phone that Tuesday morning, 19 days later, her voice unraveling before I even got the word hello out. "Vanessa, doctor. Ninwosu's office just called us. They said there's something in your test results. Your father and I have been sitting here. What is happening? What did they find?" I held the phone very still in my hand, and I looked at the wall, and I thought, now you want to know what's happening with me. Before we get into this, please like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments right now. I want to know where you are watching from. Something about knowing someone out there is listening makes this easier to say out loud. To understand why my mother's panic felt like the wrong kind of too late, you have to understand Fulfan the Cole family of Charlotte, North Carolina, as it had operated for the entire 34 years of my life. My parents, Gerald and Diane Cole, had two daughters. I came first, born in 1990, in the years when Gerald's contracting business was just getting its legs and money was tight and my mother was 26 and still figuring out who she was. Then came Amber, 4 years later, born on a Tuesday in June, when Gerald had just landed the Eastfield Commons contract, his biggest to date. Diane had figured out motherhood, and the whole house on Crestfield Drive apparently smelled like lavender and possibility. I don't say any of this to be uncharitable. I have spent a long time and a very specific amount of money. $1,400 over 3 years with Dr. Linda Faber in South Park, trying to be genuinely fair to my parents, to see them as people rather than archetypes of everything I lacked, and I do see them as people. My father, Gerald, is 63 years old, still tan from decades of outdoor work, still wears his Charlotte 49ers baseball cap to every family dinner like a talisman. He built every shelf in my first apartment with his own hands and refused payment. He tells the same 4 jokes on a rotation and laughs hardest at his own punchlines every single time, and there is something almost sweet about that. My mother, Diane, is 60 years old, 5'4", always in a blazer for her Keller Williams listings, always with a coffee from the Starbucks on Park Road. She loves true crime podcasts and thinks she's funnier than she is, and once spent 4 hours helping me write a cover letter for a job I ended up not even applying for. She did it without complaint. These are real people. They have genuine warmth in them. I want you to know that, because what I'm about to tell you isn't a story about monsters. It's a story about something more ordinary and more damaging than monsters. It's a story about the quiet daily math of being a family's second fun priority. For 34 years, Amber is the kind of beautiful that rearranges rooms. She got my mother's cheekbones and my father's easy smile and something I can only call magnetism, where she walks into a space and the energy reorganizes itself around her without her asking. She was Myers Park High School's homecoming queen. She scored a 1360 on her SAT, and my parents threw her a party at the house with a sheet cake and streamers. I scored a 1490 6 months later, and my dad took us to Applebee's and called it a celebration, which it was just a quieter, less streamered one. Amber went to UNC Chapel Hill on a partial scholarship for communications. I went to UNC Charlotte on a larger academic scholarship, studied finance, graduated with a 3.9 GPA, and currently hold the title of Senior Financial Analyst at Truist Bank at a salary of $118,000. year, plus a performance bonus that last year came to another $20,500. Nobody has ever thrown me a party for any of that. I stopped expecting one somewhere around age 25. The thing about growing up as the capable daughter, the reliable one, the one who handles things, is that you get so good at not needing anything that people stop offering. You develop a kind of emotional self-sufficiency that looks like strength from the outside and maybe is strength, but it is also a particular variety of loneliness that you carry long enough that you stop noticing the weight. I managed my own college applications at 17. I signed my first lease at 22 without asking anyone to co-sign because I didn't want to give my parents the chance to say yes reluctantly. I handled my own car insurance, my own retirement account, my own health plan enrollment every November during open season, sitting alone at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet. I paid every one of my own medical bills. Have you ever been the one in your family who was just expected to handle everything? The one who was never quite allowed to fall apart? The one who, when something went wrong, got up and quietly fixed it, not because she wanted to, but because nobody else was going to? Drop a yes in the comments if you know exactly what I mean. Because I had built my entire adult life around that identity, and for a long time I had mistaken the building for the freedom. I found the cyst at my annual appointment in May. Dr. Sarah Peterman at OBGYN Associates on Blythe Boulevard did a routine pelvic ultrasound, and she said, with the practiced calm of someone who delivers unwanted news daily, "There's a mass on your right ovary, Vanessa, about 8.3 centimeters. We need to look at this more carefully. 8.3 centimeters, roughly the size of a peach." I had been walking around with a peach-sized growth on my right ovary for some unknown period of time, attributing the occasional pelvic ache to long hours at my desk, to stress, to the general low-grade protest of a body that works hard and rests too little. I am extremely good at attributing things to stress. The mass was a dermoid cyst, a teratoma. Benign in most cases, but at my age, with that size, Dr. Peterman referred me to a gynecologic surgeon at Carolinas Medical, Dr. Rachel Nwosu. Her office was on the fourth floor of the main hospital, and she had diplomas from Duke Medical School and Johns Hopkins on her wall and spoke to me in complete sentences like I was intelligent, which I appreciated more than I let on. She recommended a laparoscopic right oophorectomy, removal of the right ovary, because the cyst was too large to drain and she wanted the full pathology. Better to know everything, she said. I agreed with her completely. I have always preferred knowing, even when the knowing cost something. Surgery was scheduled for September 14th, a Thursday. I told my family at Sunday dinner in August, at my parents' house on Crestfield Drive, the same table I'd grown up at, with the same slight wobble on the left side that my father had been perpetually about to fix for 11 years. My mother had made pot roast. My father was in the den with the Panthers' preseason coverage too loud. Amber was there with her husband, Brett. Brett Harrington, 32, a mortgage banker at Bank of America, the kind of man who uses the word synergy at family dinners without self-awareness. And their daughter Harper, 18 months old, newly in love with the word no, and applying it to every situation with great personal satisfaction. I have to have surgery, I said, during a lull between the passing of the green beans and Harper's ongoing negotiation with a piece of bread. Outpatient procedure at Carolinas Medical, September 14th. My mother looked up. What kind of surgery? I explained it. The cyst, the right ovary, the laparoscopic removal, the overnight observation period, the 4 to 6 week recovery. I was matter-of-fact about it. I had rehearsed being matter-of-fact about it on the drive over. Well, my mother said, that sounds manageable. It was not said unkindly. She wasn't being dismissive on purpose. My mother has a particular way of receiving difficult news about me, a rapid, almost reflexive reassignment of it to the category of handled, that I have spent years in therapy trying not to take as a referendum on my worth. She didn't mean it the way it landed. I know that. I've known it for a long time, and knowing it has never once made it hurt less. I'll need someone to drive me home from the hospital, I said, and help out for the first few days. I won't be able to drive for a week. Of course, my mother said. We'll be there. From the den, my father. Good. And then the Panthers came back from commercial. 2 weeks before my surgery, Amber announced she was pregnant. Again. Harper was 18 months old. This new baby would be, and Amber said this with the particular radiance of someone who has never had to announce difficult news. A boy. Their first boy. My mother cried. My father got up from his chair and crossed the kitchen and hugged Amber and said, "That's my girl." His voice thick with something I had not heard in it in years. Brett shook hands with my father, and they did the back-slapping thing. Harper, oblivious, continued her bread negotiation. "We should do a gender reveal party," my mother said immediately, already animated, already planning. "Something big. The Harrington family, the neighbors. We could do it in the backyard if the weather holds." "The 14th, Amber said. "Brett's parents are free on the 14th. They're flying in from Raleigh." A beat of silence. "My surgery is on the 14th, I said. It landed quietly, not dramatically. Nobody gasped. My mother did the calculation I had watched her do my entire life. The one where she weighs what Amber needs against what I need and comes up with the same answer. And I watched it happen in real time across her face. "We can come to the hospital in the morning and then head over to the party by late afternoon," she said. "The surgery's early, right? 7 o'clock? You'll be in recovery by noon at the latest." Dr. Nwosu's office had told me I might be in observation until early afternoon, possibly 2 or 3, depending on the procedure. "Sure," I said. I told myself it was fine. I had been telling myself things were fine for 34 years, and I was very practiced at it. 2 days before my surgery, I called my mother to confirm the plan. I remember exactly where I was. Standing in my kitchen making coffee, the early September morning light coming through the window over the sink. "Oh, honey." Pause. "Your dad has to pick up Brett's father from the airport at 5:30 in the morning. His flight gets in early, and they couldn't change it. And I really need to have the food set up before guests start arriving. But we will absolutely come to see you in recovery as soon as we're done with the setup. By 2 at the very latest." I held my coffee mug and I looked at the light on my kitchen counter, and I did not say what I was thinking, which was, the party starts at 2. My surgery is at 7 in the morning. There are 7 hours between those two things, and you cannot find one of them for me. What I said was, "I'll have Maya." "Of course you will," my mother said, with obvious relief. "Maya is wonderful." "You'll be fine. Maya Torres has been my best friend since sophomore year at UNC Charlotte. She is 34 years old and teaches kindergarten at Cornelius Elementary, and is the most reliably present human being I have ever known." When I called her, she said yes without pausing to think about it. She said, "I already took the day off." She said it like showing up was obvious, like it was the only possible answer. The surgery took 2 hours and 47 minutes. Dr. Nwosu's team removed the right ovary intact, which mattered for the pathology. I came out of the anesthesia at just after 10 in the morning. Groggy, throat sore from the intubation, cold despite the blanket, profoundly relieved to be on the other side of it. Deb, my recovery nurse, had warm hands and a quiet efficiency I found deeply comforting. She asked me my name and the year and the name of the current president. I answered all 3 correctly. She smiled. Maya had been in the waiting room since 6 in the morning. She had driven there in the dark before rush hour, with a book and a bag of almonds and her kindergarten teacher tote bag with the apple patch on the side. When they moved me to a bay, she came in and sat next to me and held my hand and asked if I wanted water or a popsicle, or to just talk about nothing for a while. "Nothing," I said. "Perfect," she said. And she sat there with me in the quiet and didn't ask for anything. My mother texted at 11:14, "How did it go? Hope it was fast and easy. Big day here." With a balloon emoji, an actual balloon emoji, like it was someone's birthday. I typed back, "All good, thank you," and turned the phone face down on the hospital tray. At 3:16, she sent a photo. Blue confetti exploding in the backyard on Crestfield Drive. Amber laughing with her hands over her mouth. My parents in the background, my father's arm around my mother, both of them luminous with joy. Harper sitting in a tiny pink lawn chair holding a blue balloon. The caption said, "Our boy is coming." So thrilled, followed by 17 emojis. I was still in the hospital. I was lying in a bed on the 6th floor of Carolina's Medical Center with a compression device inflating and deflating around my calves every 40 seconds to prevent blood clots, and an IV still in my left arm, looking at a photo of my family at a party they had prioritized over my surgery. I want to ask you something right now, and I want you to actually think about it before you scroll past. Has anyone in your life ever made you feel like your pain had to earn its place at the top of their priority list before it counted? Like you were always one competing obligation away from being postponed? Leave me a comment. Tell me if you've been there. Because I had been rationalizing that feeling for 3 decades, and lying in that hospital bed, I felt the rationalization finally run out of room. I was discharged the next morning. Maya picked me up and brought me home to my apartment, which smelled like warmth and garlic and fresh herbs, because she had made chicken soup from scratch the night before. A whole chicken, celery, carrots, the real kind, the hours-long kind. She had also stocked my refrigerator and put fresh flowers in a glass on my kitchen counter and made my bed with clean sheets. I stood in my doorway and just looked at it for a moment. My parents did not come. Not that day, not the next. My mother called twice in the first week, short calls, distracted. Once from her car between listings, once while Amber was visiting her at the house. She asked how I was feeling. I said fine. She said good. 7 of the 11 minutes of the second call were about Amber's pregnancy nausea, which was apparently worse than it had with Harper, and the specialty crackers the midwife had recommended, and how Amber was really struggling, which was hard on the whole family. My father did not call. He texted once 4 days after surgery, heard it went well, feel better, 11 words, nothing else. David Osei, my partner, an architect at a firm in uptown Charlotte, 37 years old, a steady and quiet man who had been in my life for 2 years and who I had been slightly suspicious of the entire time because his consistency felt too good to trust, had been in Denver for a project when I had the surgery. He'd planned to stay another week. He flew home 4 days early without being asked, walked through my door with 2 bags from Trader Joe's, cooked dinner, sat on the couch with me, and watched 3 episodes of whatever I wanted, without once mentioning the Denver project or the money the early return had cost him. He is not a man who makes speeches. He loves by showing up, and I had spent my whole life not quite believing that was real. 1 week post-surgery, I texted my mother, still recovering. Would really love to see you both this week if you can manage it. She responded 4 hours later. Oh, of course. Things have been so crazy. Amber's been so sick with this one. Worse than with Harper. We're trying to help as much as we can. How about next weekend? Next weekend became the one after that. My father had a job in Cornelius that ran long. That weekend was canceled because Amber had a prenatal ultrasound and my mother wanted to be there. 3 weeks out from my surgery, they had not come. I need to be honest with you about what that felt like, because the honesty is the whole point of this. I was not surprised. I was devastated. Genuinely, deeply, bone-tired devastated, but I was not surprised. There is a specific cruelty in that combination. When the betrayal is both painful and exactly what you should have expected. When you realize you'd been quietly bracing for it all along. David asked me one evening, on the couch, the way he asks, think quietly without pressure, "Are you angry?" "Yes," I said. "At them? At how unsurprised I am," I said. And I started to cry, which I hadn't let myself do since the hospital. He didn't say anything. He put his arm around me and let me. I went back to Dr. Nwosu for my 2-week post-op follow-up on September 28th. Routine appointment. Check the incisions. Confirm healing. Review pathology results. Clear me for light activity. The incisions were healing well. 3 small laparoscopic sites already fading. Dr. Nwosu confirmed no signs of infection and said my recovery looked excellent. She told me I could return to desk work the following week. Then she opened a different folder. "I want to talk to you about the genetic screening results," she said. I had almost forgotten they'd run genetic screening alongside the pathology. It was part of the standard surgical workup given my age and the reason for the oophorectomy. We found something, she said. She was watching me with the same calibrated precision she'd had at our first consultation, giving me the information at exactly the rate I could process it. You tested positive for a BRCA1 mutation, Vanessa. BRCA1. I knew enough to know what that meant. Had a smartphone and a functioning search history, and I'd spent some late nights in the weeks before surgery falling down medical rabbit holes. Elevated lifetime risk of breast cancer, somewhere between 55 and 72%, depending on the specific variant. Elevated lifetime risk of ovarian cancer, around 44%. I was 34. I had already lost one ovary. The room went very still, doctor. Nwosu walked me through everything with the thoroughness I had come to expect from her. The surveillance protocol, the 6-month imaging schedule, the risk reduction options, a referral to a genetic counselor named Priya Kapoor at the Levine Cancer Institute on Moorhead Street. We talked for 50 minutes. She did not rush. She answered every question I asked and several I didn't know I had. Before I left, I asked, "Does this affect anyone else in my family?" "Potentially," she said. B1's is hereditary. Your biological relatives, parents, siblings, first-degree family members, would be at elevated risk as well. Your sister, given her age and the fact that she's currently pregnant, should be tested as soon as possible. Your mother should be tested as well. I sat with that for a moment. You're not obligated to share this information with anyone, Dr. Nwosu said carefully. Your genetic results are yours. But given your sister's pregnancy and age, the genetic counselor will discuss timing and approach with you when you meet. Then, she paused. Vanessa, do you have support right now? For processing something like this? I thought about my apartment and the smell of Maya's soup, David's jacket on the hook by my door, the unopened texts from my mother about Amber's crackers and nausea and prenatal appointments. I do, I said. Just not from the people I grew up with. I spent 4 days sitting with the diagnosis before I told anyone. David first, the evening I found out. Over dinner I couldn't eat. I watched his face go still and serious when I said the words, and he reached across the table and took both my hands and said, "Okay, what do you need to understand right now? And what do you need to feel right now? We can do both, just not at the same time." I chose feeling first. We dealt with the understanding over the following days, with Dr. Kapoor's intake paperwork spread across the kitchen table. Maya the next day, on the phone. She cried briefly, efficiently, the way she does everything, and then asked me 3 practical questions in a row and offered to come to my first Levine appointment. She came. She sat in the waiting room with her tote bag and a New Yorker and the focused calm of someone who is not going to fall apart in public on your behalf, which was exactly what I needed. Doctor. Faber on the day after that. I sat in her office in South Park, in the chair I had occupied for 3 years, and I said, "I have a BRCA1 mutation, and my parents haven't visited since my surgery, and I don't know whether to tell them, or when, or how." Dr. Faber has silver hair and speaks with the precision of someone who has thought carefully about every word she uses. She almost never gives direct advice. Instead, she asks questions that are basically advice. What would you want to happen if you told them? Best case. I thought about it genuinely. I want my mother to say she's sorry she wasn't there. I want my father to show up and I want them to understand that I needed them and they chose something else. Do you think that's what would happen? Long pause. No. So what are your other options? I had options. I knew I had them. Priya Kapoor had made very clear that disclosure was my choice, my timeline, my right. But there was Amber, 28 weeks pregnant, at potentially elevated risk, with a baby coming. That changed the calculus. That made the decision about more than just me. I made my decision over 3 days, in the way I make most important decisions, slowly in pieces, testing each piece for structural soundness before committing to the next. I would tell them. But I would do it on my terms, at my pace, with the steadiness and years in therapy building. I called Dr. Nosu's office on October 2nd, a Friday, spoke with her nurse. said I would be sharing the genetic information with families members within the next few days, and that they might receive questions. The nurse noted it. I planned to call my parents that weekend. I was not prepared for what happened 2 days earlier. My mother called on Tuesday morning at 11:47. I know the exact time because I still have the call log on my phone. She was crying before I said hello. The loud, frightened kind, the kind I had heard from her maybe 3 times in life. Vanessa, honey, doctor. Nwosu's office just called us. They called your father and me both. They said there was something in your test results, and that you'd been notified, and that we needed to know because of Amber, that Amber might need. What is happening? Why didn't you call us? Are you? She broke down. Fully. My mother, who had efficiently reprioritized my surgical recovery for 3 solid weeks, was coming apart in real time on the phone because a doctor's office had called her. I let her finish. I held the phone and looked at the October light on my kitchen wall, and I let her say all of it. Vanessa, say something. We've been sitting here, your father and I, for the last hour. Mom, I said. She went quiet. I found out 4 days ago. I have been processing it with my genetic counselor, my surgeon, my therapist, and the people who were actually present when I had my surgery. I was planning to call you this weekend. Silence. A different quality of silence than before. I have a BRCA1 mutation, I said. It means I carry a significantly elevated lifetime risk of breast and ovarian cancer. I've already lost one ovary. I have a care plan. I am not in immediate danger. I said it steadily, each sentence its own complete unit. What this means for you and for Amber is that she needs to be tested as soon as possible, given the pregnancy. That's the most urgent piece of this. Her OB needs to know. Oh my God, my mother whispered. I know. Why didn't you call us the moment you found out? We're your parents. We should have been the first too. And there it was, that word. Should. The architecture of my entire relationship with my parents, built entirely in the conditional tense. Should have been there. Should have known. Should. Mom, I said, and I gathered what I needed to say from somewhere deep in my chest where I'd been keeping it for a very long time. You weren't in the waiting room when I came out of surgery. You weren't there the day I came home. You didn't visit for 3 weeks. I texted you twice asking if you could come, and both times you rescheduled because of things related to Amber. My voice did not shake. I was not screaming. I was precise, which is what happens when you have passed through the hot center of something and come out the other side. I have been recovering alone and processing a significant medical diagnosis alone because the people who were supposed to be my family were not available. Silence. I am not saying this to hurt you, I said. I am saying it because it is true, and I have spent my entire life being the only person in this family who isn't allowed to say true things. I heard my mother start to cry again. Quieter this time. Here's what I want to know, and I genuinely want your answer in the comments. If the person who wasn't there during your worst moment came running the second they needed something from you, what would you do? Would you answer the phone? Would you be generous? Or would you, for once in your life, let yourself be exactly as small as the situation warranted? Because I had spent 34 years choosing generous, and I was standing at the edge of something different, and I want to know what you would have chosen. I answered the phone. I gave her the information she needed about Amber, but not the way I would have 3 months ago. My father called 20 minutes after my mother. His voice was contained and tight in the way it gets when he's frightened and trying not to let the frightened show. Your mother told me, he said. Yes. Are you going to be okay? I'm working with excellent people at Levine Cancer Institute. I have a surveillance schedule and a care plan, and I have good people around me. He was quiet for a moment. Outside, on my street, I could hear someone mowing a lawn. October in Charlotte still warm enough for mowing. I should have come sooner, he said. After the surgery, I should have come. It was 4 words short of an apology. Gerald Cole has never been a man who excavates his interior easily, and I have spent my whole life learning to read the silences between his sentences. This particular silence, the one after I should have come, had a texture I hadn't felt from him before. Something that might have been shame. Real shame. Not the reflexive kind. Yeah, I said. You should have. He cleared his throat. Can we come this week? I felt the old pull, the one that had kept our family functional for 34 years by never insisting on anything, by smoothing every surface, by accepting whatever was offered and calling it enough. The pull that said, say yes, make it easy, don't make it a thing. Friday, I said, 4 o'clock, I'll make coffee. Okay, he said. Thank you, Vanessa. He hung up first. I sat with the phone in my hand for a moment in the quiet of my apartment, and then I texted Maya. They're coming Friday. She sent back a single word, good. They came on Friday afternoon. Gerald in his 49ers cap, Diane in her Keller Williams blazer like she'd come from a listing, which she might have. They stood in my doorway looking slightly smaller than I expected. Or maybe I had grown without noticing. My mother hugged me in the doorway and held on longer than usual. Held on with a different kind of intention. Not the automatic hug of arrivals and departures, but something deliberate. And I let her, because I am 34 years old and I still need my mother sometimes. Maybe especially when I'm furious at her. There's a particular cruelty in that, too. We sat at my small dining table with the coffee I'd made, and the shortbread cookies from Harris Teeter on Independence Boulevard. The first 20 minutes were careful, quiet. My mother asked about Priya Kapoor and the Levine Cancer Institute, and I told her about the surveillance protocol and the imaging schedule. My father asked whether the BRCA1 mutation came from his side of the family or hers. I told him we didn't know yet. The genetic counselor would help map that. He nodded slowly, his hands flat on the table. Then my mother said, we should have been there, Vanessa. I know that. The surgery, all of it. I know. Amber's gender reveal, I said. Yes. She looked at the table between us. I was trying to do both. I told myself I could do both. But you needed me to choose you, and I chose her. I've been choosing her your whole life and not seeing it clearly enough to stop. I had not expected her to say it. Not that clearly. Not without the usual softening, the usual redirects. Yes, I said. You have. My father placed his hand flat on the table between us, not reaching for mine, just setting it there, open-palmed, like something being offered without knowing how to offer it. We didn't know how to have two different daughters, he said. Amber needed things from us, visible things, loud things. You never seemed to need anything, but that wasn't fair to you. You needed things, we just didn't ask. I stopped asking, I said. When you're young enough, you stop asking so you don't have to hear the answer. The refrigerator hummed. Outside on Selwyn Avenue, a car went by with music playing, something with bass. Harper would be napping right now at Amber's house across town. A boy was coming in a few months. Life was continuing in all its complicated, overlapping directions. I don't know what comes next for us, I said, after the quiet had settled into something almost comfortable. I'm not ready to say everything is fine. But I needed you to hear that I was there in that hospital alone, and I needed to be the one who said it. My mother nodded. My father's hand stayed on the table. It was not a movie reconciliation. Nobody wept dramatically. Nobody made promises neither side knew how to keep. It was two aging parents sitting across from a daughter they had spent 34 years underestimating. In her apartment, with decent coffee and supermarket cookies and the specific quiet of a woman who has decided to stop carrying things she never agreed to carry. That was 8 months ago. It is a Saturday morning in June, and I am at the desk in my home office in the house David and I moved into together in Dilworth last month. The light this time of morning comes through the window at an angle I've already grown fond of. It hits the orchid on the windowsill, the one David gave me for my birthday, which I was certain I would kill and have not, and makes it look lit from the inside. Here is where things stand. I go to Levine Cancer Institute every 6 months for surveillance. My last imaging was clear. I have a team I trust, a protocol that feels manageable, and a relationship with my own body that is more attentive than it's ever been, which is not nothing. The BRCA1 diagnosis changed the shape of my future in ways I am still learning to inhabit, but it did not break me. I had already done the harder work of not letting other people's choices break me, and that turned out to be the better preparation. My mother and I talk twice a week now. Not because the wound has closed, it hasn't, not entirely, but because she is making an effort I can see is costing her something real, and I have decided to meet that effort with some of my own. She came to my last Levine appointment. She sat in the waiting room with a People magazine and did not mention Amber's pregnancy once. That sounds like a small thing. It was not a small thing. My father came to dinner last month, alone, without my mother. The first time just the two of us had sat down together in years. He fixed the wobble on my kitchen chair. We ordered Thai food from the place on East Boulevard and watched the Panthers' preseason opener and talked about almost nothing, which is how Gerald Cole says most of the things he actually means. He is not a man who has learned a new language at 63, but he is trying to use the one he has more carefully. Amber was tested. She does not carry the BRCA1 mutation. When I got the call, I sat down on the floor of my bathroom and cried, the good kind, the relief kind. And then I called her directly, without going through our parents, because she is still my sister and her son is still my nephew, and none of what happened between me and our parents is entirely her fault. She called me back and cried too. She said, I didn't know it had gotten that bad, Vanessa. I didn't know how much they'd left you alone. I believe her. I also know that believing her and rebuilding trust with her are two different timelines, and I'm letting both move at their own pace without forcing them to synchronize. David and I signed the Dilworth lease together in April. He proposed 3 weeks after the Friday coffee meeting with my parents, not with fanfare, not with a restaurant and a speech, just in my old kitchen while I was making pasta, a ring in a small wooden box from a jeweler on Providence Road, asking quietly if I wanted to build something permanent with him. I said yes before he finished the question. He is not a dramatic man. I spent 34 years waiting for love that announced itself, not understanding that the kind that shows up at the hospital before 6 in the morning and flies home early from Denver and puts its hand on the table, was the one actually worth choosing. Maya was the first person I told. She screamed in her car in the Cornelius Elementary School parking lot and sent me a 20-second voice memo that I have saved in a folder I will probably never delete. Surgery scars fade. Not disappear, fade. The skin closes and smooths, and the mark becomes part of the landscape of you, something you'd notice its absence before you'd notice its presence. A record of what was removed, what was found, what you survived. I trace mine sometimes in the quiet of the morning when the light is right, not out of grief. Out of something closer to orientation, the way you might touch a scar to remember not what hurt you but where you were standing when you decided to stop waiting for rescue. My parents failed me. They failed me in a specific and patterned way for 34 years, and then they failed me so nakedly, so visibly, that even they couldn't find a way not to see it. And now we are doing the slow, imperfect, uncertain work of figuring out whether the people we are now can build something real out of the people we've been. I don't know if we can. I'm choosing to find out at my own pace with no promises made in either direction. What I know is this: I was in that hospital bed alone, and I got up and I recovered and I processed a diagnosis that would have buckled a lot of people. And I did it surrounded by the people who chose me, not the people who were obligated to. The people who chose to. That is the family I have. It doesn't look like the one I grew up in. It is warmer and quieter, and it shows up before 6 in the morning without being asked. I don't need the other kind anymore. But I'm willing to see what they do with the door I've left open. If you see yourself in this story, whether it's that moment in the recovery room, with Deb's warm hands and no family in the waiting room, or the Tuesday phone call when someone who ignored you for 3 weeks suddenly needed something from you, what would you have done differently? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, check the description.